I'm from Sioux Lookout. It's a great place, and if you know anything about Sioux Lookout, we have at least 50% Indigenous people that live in Sioux Lookout, and we're also a hub for the North for many Indigenous communities. So that's where I grew up. That's where my children grew up. I want to thank my town where I grew up. My children grew up in a place of diversity, and that's what they've embraced in their careers and where they live now. They live in the city, but Sioux Lookout is still home. And I'll just give you a little bit of background about myself. As I said, I grew up in Sioux Lookout. Just about my entire career has been in adult developmental services, starting in British Columbia when I was there for a while, and then when I moved back to Sioux Lookout. And most of that was frontline. I've been in management for the last about 11 years, and I'm actually only a new ED, and I've been an executive director for under a year. And that's important, that story, because I'll share a little bit about it later. So my heroes, once I started learning about FASD, my heroes were the individuals that live with FASD, that overcome and that highlight their strengths, the people that I know, and their caregivers and their families and the people that support them. So with Healthy Generations, we work with children and families. In adult services, we're working with individuals, families, and our staff. Those are all my heroes. They're my reason for feeling that I have purpose in my present job, and I just wanted to say that and acknowledge that. And also I have some biases coming from the developmental services field. That sometimes the biases come up against, I'll just be honest, you have to grapple with things. And that's another word in my agency I've been really teaching my staff about. Sometimes we need to grapple. We'll have two ideas, they seem opposing, but they're really not. So within the developmental services field, we've been promoting full inclusion and full citizenship for a very long time. In Sioux Lookout, I remember when there was a separate classroom in a different building behind the high school for the children that had developmental disabilities, and they never entered into regular classrooms. That's not the way it is now. So some of my colleagues in the developmental services field, when they hear about FASD classrooms, they think it's that. And I explained that's not what it is, and I think it was very inspiring to hear about what the Kenora-Patricia District School Board is doing, because that's not what they're doing. They might have some separate classrooms with smaller ratios, teaching kids skills, but they're teaching them skills so they can go into the regular classroom, so they can live in society and have success even with their families. So sometimes it sounds like it's opposing, but it's not. But that is a bias I have. We're always thinking about full inclusion. What would it take? And what it would take for full inclusion is to have supportive environments wherever we go. So in a small town like Sioux Lookout, we can actually do that. So my staff who works with employment, finding people's jobs, she doesn't actually now have to go herself and talk to an employer and explain FASD. She's actually trained the employment counselor at the agency down the street, whose job it is to help people find jobs. They have that understanding. She's trained that person, and they go down the street. So we've tried to create those supportive environments in the community to make our community itself more inclusive. So just giving you a background of some of those biases and how they work. How did I first, run into knowing about FASD? Well, 25 years ago, when I was pregnant with my second child, I had been working off and on, took a break from work, did some contract work, and I learned about FASD in downtown Sioux Lookout, and I'll explain that. In downtown Sioux Lookout, there was this little program called Healthy Generations, and at the time it was above the post office, right downtown. Judy Kay, who some of you know, she was the coordinator, and just someone acquaintance I had, and she said, hey, I have some work. And guess what? My first involvement with FASD was those posters and coasters that Nancy talked about. She had me go into all the bars in Sioux Lookout. She thought it would be great. I was 9 months pregnant. And to put posters and coasters and ashtrays and a bunch of different things to promote not drinking during pregnancy. So that, and then, did I really know what I was getting into? I didn't know what I didn't know. So what we did in those days, she said, well, you need to learn more about what you're doing. So she invited me to some learning sessions, and we'd huddle around a phone, a little table, and we'd be in teleconferences with people from around North America. I remember there was people from Alaska, Washington, across Canada, all over North America. And we'd be listening to, experts on FASD, on the emergent practice of supporting people with FASD. So that's where I first learned about FASD, was huddled around a little table, around a phone, listening. That was the technology back then. It's like, wow, I'm listening to someone present from Alaska, but it was on the phone. So that was my first introduction 25 years ago. And I guess they told me if I press green is go, right? There we go. I just wanted to make some acknowledgements here. I don't know exactly about the beginning of FASD-ONE. It's not something I've been involved with for a very long time. But what I've noticed so far is that it is built around very passionate and tireless efforts of very knowledgeable and talented people. I'm amazed. There's some people that have even retired and they're still involved. They're retired from their main jobs, and everything they did was off the side of their desk anyway. And I asked them, so what are you doing now in retirement? Well, actually, I'm doing everything I did when I was working, but now it's, on my own time. So I'm very impressed with these people. Very, very knowledgeable. I learn a lot. They're my mentors. And some of these wonderful people I've met, I sort of feel that out of the desperation to seek and provide support, they have created a network of expertise. Like was just said earlier, whether people have the actual credentials or not, we have a huge network of expertise through FASD-ONE. And it's a privilege to be connected provincially to that body. I want to acknowledge that. And FASD-ONE, in their call to action, remember, said that Ontario is in a time of transformation. The government is developing and implementing strategies to address the needs of children, youth, and adults across all sectors. And I know in my work in developmental services, we've been invited to all sorts of planning tables. There's lots happening right now in a lot of different sectors. And every one of those planning tables that I've been inviting to, the subject of FASD comes up. It doesn't matter which one it is, especially in our area, it's a major topic of discussion. And transformation is a word across sectors, and in developmental services, that is a word that they've been using for a very long time. Transformation means really doing things differently. And as a representative of the Intervention and Support Action Group, we acknowledge the recommendations that were made in our area, like in that document. You can look at it online. So intervention and support. Children, youth, and adults and their caregivers will have ready access to culturally sensitive resources and services designed to address and accommodate their individual lifelong needs. I'm very glad that cultural is in there as well. I'm just going to skip over the other ones. There's specifically under intervention and supports, it crosses all sectors, but there's a whole list of, I believe, 8 items. And would just notice that amongst those items, I've sort of highlighted reference about things where networking and collaborating would be necessary to make these things actually happen. Service pathways, service interventions, the expansion of collaborative family-centered service coordination, talking about effective programming to support students with this brain-based disorder, talking about schools, support cross-sector lifelong FASD services in there. And it talks about all families having access. And then it goes on talking about some areas in the justice system. So I just wanted to acknowledge that is in the document. That was the recommendations that came through FASD-ONE. So what has been the main activity of our action group? I just wanted to present that. The main activity we've been involved with is a series of caregiver conferences around the province. There's some that have already occurred in Southern Ontario, and the final one for the year is about to happen next week. And I'll explain more about that at the end. When I was asked to speak on behalf of our group, what I was asked to talk about is what's happening in the north. So I'm just going to share stories. I might not capture everything, but hopefully you'll get an idea of what can be done in a vast geography when you think you don't have a lot going on, but I think we've actually managed to do quite a bit. just some general themes when you're talking about leveraging for impact. You think about systems thinking. Way back in university, I was fascinated by systems thinking, which came from the science sector and sort of was pulled into the social service sector. And another theme, collaboration, collective impact. That means together. Together we have a greater impact. Scaling up. You have a small success, a pilot project, and you scale it to a larger provincial or national. Busting out of silos by having community engagement. And also the need for skilled facilitators and conveners of collaboration tables and backbone agencies. And I know, for instance, Breaking the Cycle, they have been a backbone agency for many activities. And they're skilled facilitators. Margaret Leslie has been a skilled facilitator for a lot of those initiatives. Systems thinking. Remember, it's a term used to describe a perspective and a set of methods and tools that make it possible to look at the full extent of a system rather than at the fragments and parts. Too often, we're in our little silos, we're fragmented, we might even be an expert, but at only what we do, and only in our sector. So a systems approach, I like this, it becomes clear that messy, long-standing problems are created by the systems in which they exist. Systems create problems. System thinking. At its best, systems thinking encourages efforts to address the root causes of big problems. Systems thinkers see the whole picture, understand the relationships in the system, and can identify opportunities for very strategic interventions that might really make a difference. I took some training through Tamarack Institute, and I know the Social Innovation Generation on the University of Waterloo, some of these materials, they talk about that a lot too. There is a lot of research actually on collaboration and systems thinking and how to change a system, if you want to look more into that. This is another interesting thing, that systems are nested. So our sectors that we all represent here, we're made up of mini systems, like within each of our organizations, and we're also part of a greater system. So this is all the better reason to get out of our silos and to work across sectors as we support people with FASD, especially if we want to have people truly flourish as valued members of society with a strength-based approach. And I'll go back to my bias about inclusion, to really be included in society and be full members of our communities. So five conditions of collective success, and I've sort of laid these over in my mind of collaborations that have worked really well, and often if you look at it, they did all these things. They had a common agenda, and from what I read, a common agenda isn't just a vague common agenda, it's a very specific common agenda. And it might not be FASD. It might be better outcomes for children or families and a specific outcome. But you can still have a common agenda, even if you have competing budgets. A shared measurement system. You've heard a lot about that. How can we compare? How can we compare data if we don't have shared measurement systems? Mutually reinforcing activities. So what I do in my sector can be reinforcing to what you're doing and vice versa. Continuous communication. And of course, a backbone support organization. Often there's an organization or a person sometimes who comes forward and says, okay, I'll be the backbone organization for that initiative. We'll keep it going. We'll make sure it won't die. We'll provide the infrastructure. And I was talking to some people last night, and I said I was going to erase this page on egos because part of this was part of a different presentation at one time. Good collaboration across multi-sector collaboration, it means no egos. So when I was an acting executive director for 1 year, you start rubbing shoulders with EDs, really good people, very passionate people in my sector, and in multiple other sectors. But I just sort of observed, and also I know a lot of research shows this too, you can't be in it for power or prestige. You have to be in it to roll up your sleeves and work yourself. And you have to let your ego go and let the ego of your agency go or your sector. And you can't think about just what you're going to get out of it for yourself or your own agency. You got to let that go, and you come as a joint effort to this table. And I really also appreciated what was said previously about people being equals. And when we've been invited as our agency to some Indigenous tables for planning, we go there to listen and to ask questions, and we're asked questions, but we're there as all equals to figure out what's a better way to do this. You know, we have been supporting individuals with developmental disabilities in our agency for years, and did we have a respect of the cultural component or the loss of culture? For years we didn't. So we're really new in really trying to reinvent ourselves and listen. So it's fine to have agendas. That's one thing I learned from Tamarack Institute. Like, we always hear, leave your agenda at the door and don't bring it in. You actually are supposed to bring your agenda, put it on the table, and make it known. If you have certain constraints, make everybody know in your collaborative table, because you can solve it together. You have to be honest. So you let the egos go, but you have to be honest about what you come with and what your parameters are. So I'm just going to give you one story now. That was all the introduction. The story, I think, will go faster. So Kenora Rainy River districts, what's happening there? You've heard some of it from the school board, which is quite inspiring. But I'm going to reveal something that you might not know. So I'm going to start with Healthy Generations Family Support Program. That's a small CAPC program that's housed within my agency, supporting children from 0 to 6 and their families living with FASD. And I put 20 years, I think it's been over 25 years that it's been in existence. And like I say, I had a connection to that 25 years ago myself. That was my first introduction. And there's our mandate, you can see, a very specific mandate, which we're glad to have, and which keeps us very busy. And I want to talk about the beginnings of change within one agency. So change starts usually with the change agent. We had our own change agent, Judy Kay, a friend of mine, who was my first mentor on FASD. She was our former coordinator of the Healthy Generations program. She caused a great paradigm shift within our agency. And those of you who know what that means, the FASD paradigm shift, the aha moment when you realize that you just didn't get it until then, and your whole thoughts of how to support an individual totally changed. Even though she worked in a children's program, we utilized and leveraged her expertise, her years of expertise in training and work to actually inform what we were doing in adult services. And we started using her to actually train our staff who worked in adult services. And out of there, you know, we started sending, and I know she traveled regionally and even provincially and across the country at the time. So we didn't really know what a gem we had. We just thought she was our gem at the time. So what that did is it connected our whole community, because she would go out and do community engagement and capacity building, which created supportive environments for individuals right within the community. And also during that time, just bringing it back, I remember Margaret Leslie came up for a week one time and did training within our community. And I had a week of training from her. Like, that was a long time ago. We're not that old, are we, Margaret? Where are you? So there was an knowledge exchange. And another thing happened. Two of the parents that were in our Healthy Generations Family Support Group, they actually pursued their master's degrees in the area of FASD, and they wrote their thesis in that area. They're both social workers, they're foster parents, adoptive parents. One is also doing a family home provider in adults developmental services. They are now seasoned trainers in our region. So they started out as just caregivers. They became seasoned trainers, and I know in many of your communities it's happened just like that. Out of your support group, people have become experts, and they become seasoned trainers who go beyond and train others. We have veteran parents within our group. Our group is, even though our program is for children and their families, our support group includes parents of adults with FASD, because some of those veterans have become parent mentors. And this is another little bit of a bias about that, something that I think can help with inclusion, is that if all of your support is paid support, then you really aren't included in the community and society. You have to create natural relationships and natural support, like we all need. Some people, like we all in some ways need some sort of support. And these parents have become a natural support group to each other, 24-hour hotline to each other. They text, they call, any hour of the night or day, they're there for each other. And none of that is paid. But they have become experts. And actually, and sometimes there are teachers as well. And so lots of resources for community capacity building have come out of an actual support group. Just some other Kenora Rainy River regional initiatives. In 2010, there was a project which you can actually see the summary of it on the Kenora, on the school board's website, actually. I put the link there. And out of that came an FASD key workers group. And it was a research project at the time. Diane Melvin had come up and done training both with key workers as well as their supervisors. So not only the people doing frontline work, but people supervising them. And that was across sectors and across our region. That key worker group still continues to this day through video conference, phone calls on a monthly basis. So it's something that continues. Another thing that has happened is that service delivery networks, and also I should add to this family support groups of some kind, but there's a lot of service delivery networks in different communities in northwestern Ontario. I know in Sioux Lookout, the one that we started, it sort of waxed and waned over the years, you know, depending on leadership. And but I know we've got a resurgence of networking activity happening within our communities. I know in Fort Francis, in Red Lake, in Kenora, people are starting groups so they can get together and come together with their expertise and network. Another important partner for us in the north to connect us to some networks of expertise and collaboration is Surrey Place Centre here in Toronto. They're an important partner with adult services, adult developmental services, but they provide for us an adult FASD diagnostic service for Northern Ontario. And we know how fortunate we are to have that. So Valerie Temple, you saw her on the picture there, part of the national guidelines. She comes up to Sioux Lookout regularly because the Surrey Place clinicians come up there to visit so they can see people face to face. So when we talk to them on the video conference, we actually know them. So that's something we're fortunate to have. The other is you've heard about the FASD diagnostic clinic out of Kenora. So they run 8 clinics annually in our region, and they have host communities in Sioux Lookout, Fort Francis, and Kenora. Each of those communities, they've collaborated with local physicians and included them in their training that they have. So we have physicians in local communities that are part of those diagnostic committees. So when they travel around, they actually have someone in the community they can work with. And this was offered as a collaboration between 4 cornerstone agencies: Firefly, Lake of the Woods District Hospital, BMO's Tribal Council, and Creighton Youth Services. And they operate their own regional advisory group, and they meet on a regular basis, so they keep informed about what the region wants. And I know back in 2006, there was a pilot project for diagnosis. It didn't last forever because it was time limited, but many of the people that were involved back then, they're involved again with this. So the training they had back then, it didn't go wasted. They're back in business. And also you heard about the Kenora-Patricia District School Board. Very proud of them. I was very proud of their presentation. You guys were amazing. Now what you don't know is that Sean Monteith, the Director of Education, he was the first delegate that we promoted from our region to get involved with FASD-ONE. That was strategic. Do you think that was a good idea? And that came out of the first gathering we had of the FASD Northwestern Ontario Regional Network. So what this was, it started as an idea of Jack Martin, who was from the youth justice sector, and it was, let's bring people together from agencies across sectors in Northwestern Ontario that support individuals living with FASD. So Jack was another seasoned change agent. He's since retired, but he did some amazing work over years, tireless. He was a change agent, another one of a mentor for many. We had a meeting in 2013, just with 4 to 5 people. Jack was one of them, myself and some other people, and we just planned, well, let's have a regional meeting, just out of the blue. So we did. We had this regional meeting September 9th, 2013, and we came up with 12 action plans of our own, for our own region, and we had 60 people there representing multiple sectors from across our region. And we sort of mapped out what is everybody doing, and we were amazed because we did not know what each other were doing. We were sometimes duplicating, sometimes we saw the gaps, and one of the things that we identified, I didn't put it in here, we identified at that meeting that we didn't just see gaps, we actually saw a cliff of support. The gap is not just, I can see the gap and I can cross it. We felt that youth were falling off a cliff and not getting access to support. Even if support was there was barriers to get that support. And so we were very concerned about people that were showing up in jail and in our shelters who had fallen off the cliff. That's how we viewed it. We thought it was a very serious matter. We felt separated from the provincial activities, I have to be honest. And we had a goal to get connected. At that meeting, we all talked about it. And we didn't feel adequately connected to one another. And it was at that meeting that Sean might not remember, but he came up to me and he said, I'm willing to go on FASD. And I know that Jack Martin was talking to him, and that happened. He was the first member out of that meeting that got involved with the Education Action Group. And since then, we've had several other people from Northwestern Ontario become part of different action groups. But I have to tell you, it was planned and strategic, I'm being honest. We didn't feel connected. We thought, we're up in Sulikout, Kenora, Red Lake, Dryden, and we don't really know what's happening in Toronto. And we wanted to be connected. And we also wanted to have a voice. And it happened. And we, by the way, people have been very welcoming at FASD-ONE, very much so. It wasn't a matter of not being welcomed. It was just, we just had to get connected. So we decided then that we were a network of networks. We found out there was little mini networks that we didn't know about, and we decided that all of these networks needed to be networked together and know what everybody else was doing, so that we could learn from each other's experience. And we formalized our regional network then, and we had a formal steering committee, and we formed a mission statement about why we exist and what we were committed to. There's just some further things there. And one of the things I want to add, and just going to insert right here, so that's some things about Northwestern Ontario. And we didn't know what each other was doing just in our vast region because of the geography. And that's why we formed that network. And by collaborating together, we've actually, one of the things, training has been a huge thing. You've got to get it into the water supply. It's got to ooze out of people so they understand FASD. It's not something that's foreign to them. They understand it. So we collaborated to bring in really good speakers into our area. We shared costs. Like, we all just pitched in. Everyone would pitch, whenever someone had an idea, let's bring so-and-so. Every agency threw in some money into the pot because we knew we'd all benefit. And people weren't stingy. And at the same time, at all these events, we continued to network. So in the spirit of utilizing our network, we're going to leverage the resources and the expertise from FASD-ONE, and the caregivers conference that we're going to do in March next week is going to be by video conference, because we thought, well, we can't choose one community. Parents and caregivers are so stretched as it is to be able to travel, sometimes 1, 2, 3, 4 hours or longer to get somewhere, and you have to figure out childcare. So what we're going to do next week, We've got 5 main communities. We've got facilitators that are going to be in each community. We've got sometimes multiple sites within a community. And then we've also connected with NAN, and we're going to have several First Nations communities that are going to be facilitated through someone from there, and Judy Kay has been involved from there as well. And what we've done is we've got some local expertise. Those same ladies I talked to you about that came out of our original support group. They've been traveling around the region. Well, they're going to be part of this. But also we've got speakers all the way from Victoria and Edmonton. And they're not actually coming to Northwestern Ontario. We're doing it all through video conference. It will be webcast, and people will be able to watch it, but not talk. And when I get that information, I'll actually let some other people know about it. But we had to turn people away. The Intervention Support Action Group really felt that these caregiver conferences are for caregivers, not for staff and not for professionals. So we didn't want professionals to sort of take over the space. But I think there'll be ways that professionals could peek in and watch. And also it's going to be archived through OTN, because we're doing it through the OTN system that we have. So it'll be saved and it'll be on there for 2 years. So this isn't a way where we're taking the money that FASD-ONE, through the Public Health Agency has provided, and we're going to leverage it for our region, and then it'll be available for free to go on and share, and our speakers have allowed us to do that as well. So that was just a little narrative about what intervention support activities have been happening up in Northwestern Ontario. So my question for you is, what networks and collaborations are you involved with as an agency? And how can you leverage your collaborations to collective impact? What you do by yourself, you can do a lot. There's a lot of experts here, but we will make a huge difference if we work together. And on that, I've got a request from Elsbeth. Where are you? Right here. She's putting together a sort of a directory of all the kinds of interventions and supports around the province that she wants to be made available and put up on the FASD-ONE website. It's still in draft form. If you could see her and connect with her, and you can get her email address, she's wanting to put more information, because I've already looked at what she gave me, and there's some people in context, people I already want to talk to, because you hear about, oh, someone over there is doing something. I want to connect with them, because maybe we can collaborate and do that together. We were even talking about, okay, this one speaker we'd really like to get, can we afford this? Well, maybe we can all pull together and do a little roadshow with some of the people we want to bring in. So that is all I had. Just sharing what we've done in Northwestern Ontario. And it's just amazing to watch, people sometimes, what I've noticed anecdotally, it's the caregivers, people who started out as caregivers themselves, who just have such passion, or they work with caregivers and children, have such passion that they're relentless. So let's not stop, we're on a roll, okay?